Welcome to the Chicago Bears Podcast, a presentation of ESPN Chicago, Chicago's home for sports. Here's your host, Pat, the designer.
Bear on, Bears fans. Pat the designer, Jason McKie, Chicago Bears Podcast. We're here for another episode of absolute football knowledge. And there's only one way to get the most knowledge that you can. That's by going to get Greg Gabriel, 30-plus year NFL scout, 9-year as scouting director and host of Greg Gabriel Talks Football Podcast on the Barroom Network. Greg, how are you doing today?
I'm doing wonderful. How about you guys?
I'm great. I mean, shout out to Jason for getting us another amazing guest on the podcast out here. I mean, J-Mac always coming through with the fire.
No, Greg, I mean, obviously, a lot of people follow him on Twitter. I've had the opportunity to know Greg for a long time from my playing days in Chicago, a guy who knows football, has a wealth of knowledge. And anytime I have the opportunity to talk ball and to talk Bears with Greg, Greg has done us a gratitude of joining on the show. So, Greg, hope all is well, man. But before we get into it, how's the family? How's the grandkids? How's everything going with you?
Everything's doing good. Grandkids are getting big. Let me just tell you this. When you get grandkids, you know how expensive your kids are.
Yeah.
Double it for grandkids.
Yeah. But you want to spend it. On that.
Grandmothers just have a way of wanting to spend money on grandkids. Yeah. I got a dozen. That could put me into bankruptcy. But hey, it is what it is.
Man, I'm not there yet, Greg. Pat called me old before the show, but I'm thankful that I don't have any grandkids on the way, at least none that I know about. But I hope I got some time until that happens.
No, it's great to have you here, man. Let's dive into this. I mean, we got so much football knowledge on the podcast between you two. Greg, I want to get your opinion on this. Let's jump straight in. When you look at as being a scout, being a scouting director, as you look at the players that the Chicago Bears brought in, how do you feel like the Bears are set up this season with this new rookie draft class coming into the to 2024?
In all honesty, I like the roster the way it's made up right now. I think they're missing one player, one key player, and that's a pure pass rusher on the defensive line. And, they've said they're going to bring one in before camp starts. Well, camp starts 2 weeks.
Yeah.
I think the veterans report 2 weeks from today. So time's getting short. We'll find out who it is. And there's not a lot of people out there, but there's two people that have familiarity with the defense and some of the coaches and or Ryan Poles. Yannick Ngakoue is probably the best pure pass rusher.
Absolutely.
Has played for the Bears defensive line coach out in Oakland. So they have familiarity with each other. And I think he had 10 sacks in Oakland the year he was coached by Coach Smith. And then Justin Houston, who was with the Ravens last year. Well, he played 2 years for the Colts under Flus. Flus was a defensive coordinator and also played in Kansas City when Poles was there. Now, Justin Houston's 34 years old, and if you look at the way Poles has leaned as far as signing people, he doesn't like to go after those guys on the wrong side of 30. But at the same time, last year you look at the season that Houston had, and he had 9.5 sacks playing only 44% of the plays. So, there's still a little gas in that tank.
Yeah, Greg, I want to go back a little bit, and we know your role with the Bears. You were the director of college scouting. So you were in that role for 9 years with the Bears. Tell the Bears fans what that role entails. What were some of the details and some of your job tasks, with that role?
Well, the title can be all encompassing, Jason, because it really depends who you're working for, and the way the front office is set up now. There's Ryan Poles, he's a general manager. Then there's Ian Cunningham, he's the assistant GM. And then you got a director of player personnel or co-directors of player personnel, and then a director of college scouting. We didn't have all that fluff. There was Jerry Angelo and me. And then Bobby DePaul had the pro side. So our responsibilities were a lot more than, say, somebody that has the title today on a team that has all those other people above him. We just had one person above us, and that really gave us a lot more freedom to get our job done. But we were responsible for a lot more.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's so interesting to hear that. When you see how the position has changed, do you like the direction that the Bears are heading with all the changes that they've made, right? You talk about the responsibility that just you had. Seems like that responsibility has been divvied up a lot more with this new regime, with this new front office.
You know what it has a lot to do with? Like anything else, money. And you want to get good people.
Yeah.
And the way you get good people is to give them good titles, and good titles equal more money.
Yeah.
So that's really what it's about. But what it gets down to is, what is your job responsibility? Forget your title. What are you being asked to do? And when I was with the Bears, I was being asked to do everything a player personnel director was being asked to do. I just didn't get paid like one, unfortunately, but that's the way it was.
Yeah, Greg, like you guys' role was so vital. I mean, a lot of these organizations, they build their teams through the draft. And we know Ryan Poles wants to build his team through the draft. And I was listening to your pod, over on Barroom earlier this morning, and you were talking about, like, I want the Bears fans to hear how much you guys sacrifice in terms of, with your families, and you're always on the road. You talk about all those things, and I was like, wow, like that's a lot. That's a lot of things.
Well, it's changed now. When I first got in the league in 1981, and then was full time in 1984. I mean, the difference between then and now is huge. And most of it is access to tape. I mean, back then, Jason, we were using 16 millimeter film, and we used to have to, and I still have the projector. It's down in my basement. Used to have to carry this big Kodak projector around and go from school to school. That was basically the only way you got access to film. Colleges would send some out, but by the time you got it, it had been spliced about 4 or 5 times. It would break, it would crack. The quality was terrible. But now everything's digitized, so it's easy. And the colleges send the stuff off to the Dub Center sometimes the night of the game or the day after the game, and the teams around the league have it for their scouts like on Monday morning. So it's so much easier to get access to the tape. But as far as being away from the road, for tax purposes, I used to have to keep track of how long I was gone. My accountant had me do that for whatever reason. But I had 5 years in a row where I was on the road over 200 nights. Oof. And that, now that included when I was working for the Giants. So that included when I was in New York for meetings, training camp, etc. But still, that's 200 nights or better. 1 year was 220 that you're not with your family. So you are giving up a lot. You're missing your kids grow up. My daughter was a pretty good high school basketball player, but when she was in high school, I was here. So for me to get to a game, especially during basketball season, when you're getting into all-star games, the combine and stuff, it was hard to get to see her play.
When you think about all the players that you've evaluated over the years, all the tape that you've watched over the years, who was the one person the second you threw that tape on, you were like, oh my God, we got something here, boys. We got to get this guy here.
That's hard to answer because there's a lot.
Yeah.
I mean, there's guys that, and I'm not trying to avoid the question. I'd have to really sit down and think about it and say, okay, who really jumped out? But there's some guys, like I do evaluation now for some agents.
Mm-hmm.
And because they want to know who they're speaking to, if he's going to be a first-round guy, a second-round guy, day 1, day 2, day 3. They want to be talking to the right people. And there's some people you put the tape on, you get about halfway through the first game and you're going, this guy's pretty damn good. And then there's other guys you just got to watch and watch and watch because you're looking for them to do something that jumps out and you never see it.
Yeah.
But, so, and some of it depends on the position they play too. I mean, at some positions, you're going to see it right away if they can play or they can't play. And it's one of his defensive line. If a guy can't get off the ball and make plays, get rid of blocks, find the ball, linebacker, they better be instinctive. If they're anticipators, they're a step late to the ball all the time.
Yeah, Greg, obviously you've been around this game for a long time, and we've talked about it, off air, off podcast, some of the coaches that you had the opportunity to work with, obviously Bill Parcells, Lovie Smith, which guy, gave you, which helped you the most in terms of your scouting, that helped you prepare to be a better scout, to be a better, employee in the front office?
Well, probably Parcells. And the funny thing is when I first went to New York, the scout or the coaches weren't as involved in scouting as they are now. But Bill would always challenge you. So you knew that when we got into a meeting, you better know that player because he's going to know something and he's going to attack you with it. And I can give you a funny story because you remember Dave Meggett.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, who's a pretty damn good punt returner and a specialty back. So we took Dave, I think, in the 5th round. Parcells was totally against it. Totally, because he didn't like his size. He was 5'7", 185 pounds, but he could run. I ran him in a 4.38. So, I mean, he was pissed. So right after we drafted them, everybody leaves the room, gets something to eat or whatever, because you're not going to be picking again for an hour and a half or whatever. So I'm walking down the hall, and here comes the big tuna. And he just looks at me and goes, "What the fuck are you guys thinking?" He goes, "This isn't a peanut eating contest. This is National Football League." And just screaming at me. So I go, "Hey, coach, he's a pretty good player." So fast forward the next day, Parcells comes in. He goes, "You guys must be right. 3 people called me last night to trade for that kid." He goes, "No shit, Bill. We do our homework, man."
It's always I love the inside look. Where was that first moment where you knew that this was okay? I have an eye for this. I absolutely can. I can look at this guy and I can break him down and tell you this is going to be an NFL player. This is going to be a next level. Or I've heard some scouts say, "Listen, we can do all the evaluation and believe everything we want and still be wrong at the end of the day." When was that point where you were like, okay, I have a good enough eye to take this very far as a career?
It's a good question. And I was actually thinking about that the other day because when I was a little kid, I guess I always watched sports and I played a lot of sports, but I watched it in more of an analytical type way.
Yeah.
So I always watched individuals instead of teams. And so I'm watching college football and I go, "Gee, that guy's pretty good." And I got these things going, heights and weights and stuff, whatever the program weight was. And this is how big this guy is. And he could be pro. And it just was something I liked doing.
Yeah.
So I knew that that's what I wanted to do. But like anything else, you got to know somebody. And it wasn't until I was playing minor league football and my coach was working for Buffalo part-time. And back then, Buffalo was in a combine. It was San Francisco, Dallas, Buffalo, and Seattle. It was called Quadra. And they hired high school coaches in the area to help supplement their grades because of, it was on that Kodak 16 millimeter tape. And you just needed something else besides what your road scouts saw. So anyway, my coach was involved doing that, and he got me involved. He introduced me to some people in Buffalo, and they had me look at some tape and grade it. And I had no idea who I was looking at. And they said, "Not a bad job." And they hired me. Like the same day they gave me the test. So that's how I got started. But it's just something that I always wanted to do. Even if I was watching a basketball game. Like I'd go back to my high school and after I got out of high school, they got a new coach and he'd recruit like hell, even though it was illegal, and bring kids from the city into the suburban school. And you'd go watch these kids and you'd say right away, you could see how much better than he was than everybody else and more athletic. And you say, "Oh, this guy's a D1 player," and sure enough, they'd end up doing that. But I think it's just the way I looked at things or looked at sports in general. And instead of just looking at a team, I always just gravitated towards looking at individuals.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Greg, so many optimism swirling around Chicagoland with Justin Fields, second year in the system, taking his next step, especially in the passing game. With the weapons that the Bears have added in terms of receivers and the weapons around him that added for Justin Fields, what is your view on that? Do you think he has what it takes to take the next step as a passer?
Well, I think the weapons are there. Now the offensive line's got to do their job, and I think the line is going to be a lot better. Nate Davis, Darnell Wright, Braxton's in the second year now, so he's already gotten his feet wet, and he played every snap last year. And you played, when you get to that second year, you always take a big jump. He just needed to get – I think he played a little bit tall last year and needed more strength in his lower body to anchor. Now, that's one of the things I wanted to ask Olin when I had it, because I know he worked with Olin. So you probably know the answer. What did he do to take care of that?
Yeah, I mean, Olin works with all those guys. You know what I'm saying? So they're putting his work and stuff like that. So, I'm not there all the time with Olin. He doesn't really, give me a lot of insight with those guys. But I know he's working with those guys. And, he does – the knowledge that he has in terms of obviously the game, but being able to help mentor and groom these guys, about how to take the next step as a pro. I think that's the thing that a lot of these guys, they gravitate to Olin for, because he's going to teach them the game, but he's also going to teach you how to be a pro. And I think that's what a lot of these guys need. These are young guys coming into the NFL. They're getting contracts. They're getting money that they never had. And now they're put in positions that there's a lot of pressure. The media market here in Chicago will tear you down if you're not performing. And that pressure can be a lot for a young kid. You have the pressure of performing. Now, there's pressure at home in terms of you got money, people want money, and you're being pulled in different directions. But at the end of the day, you got to perform out there on Sunday or Monday Night Football, whenever you're playing a game. So I think that's what Olin brings to the table when he's training these linemen. He's teaching these guys how to be pros.
See, you said the key thing right there. Teach them how to be a pro.
100%.
And you go back to our good team, 15 years ago, 17 years ago, and there are a lot of guys in that locker room that were damn good pros.
Yes.
You could go across the O-line, John Tate, Roberto, Olin, Ruben. These guys were pros. They knew how to take care of their bodies. They knew how to work. They knew how to play too, but they knew how, they played when it was time to play, and they worked when it was time to work. And just referring to those nice nights of TJ's on during the week. But
we spilling the tea. I like it. Here we go. Here we go.
But
I've never been there.
But anyway, that's what it's all about. Guys that are, the game's important to them. But to get back to what we first started about, I think if the offensive line does their job, and they could run block last year, now it's making sure the pass protection is a lot better, then I think just through experience and growing within the offense, that Justin's going to be a lot better. And I go back and I wrote about it the other day, is that, and the guy I used as a comparison is Josh Allen. Now, Josh Allen, when he was coming out of Wyoming, was not a very accurate quarterback. And there are, scouts around the league that were up and down on him. Strong arm as you'd ever see, very, very athletic, very tough, but he was all over the place throwing the ball. Now, part of it was he didn't have a great supporting cast at Wyoming, but he needed to be groomed, and he struggled his first 2 years. First 2 years in the league, he was like 56, 57% as far as throwing the ball. And then in his third year, the light came on. He jumped up to 69% from his second year to his third year. Nobody does that. And I think that's a testament to his football character and his work ethic to work on his shortcomings to become the quarterback that he's become. And I think that Fields is the same type of person. The game's important to him. He wants to be the best. So he's going to do whatever he can. Now, granted, second year in the system, that's going to be huge. He's got another comparison with Buffalo is in Allen's third year, they brought in Stephon Diggs. And this year they bring in DJ Moore. And people say, oh, DJ Moore is not Stephon Diggs. Well, go back and look at Stephon Diggs' first 5 years in the league when he was with Minnesota. Their stats are almost identical.
Yeah. It's so funny because I feel like you hear the name DJ Moore, and I always tell people, go actually look at like the tape on guys like this. Like I had the NFL all 22, so I can go back. I went back and watched some of the games, and I think you really like we hear the name and it sounds good. He's a good receiver, but when you see the talent that he actually has, when you see the speed, it's like he's one of those players that Justin Fields can't mess up. Right? Like if he's not a good quarterback or if he's just an average quarterback, this guy will take your game from here to here just because he's that good. And when I watch DJ Moore, like that's one of the things that gets me excited because I talked about this with Carmen DeFalco yesterday. When I look at the players who were on the team last season and I say, what if DJ Moore's in that position? We're probably talking about a lot more Chicago Bears wins last season, don't you think?
Oh, yeah. But, you look at DJ, look at his history. He had a good quarterback for a year and a half. That's it.
That's it.
After that, that's his first year and a half in the league. After that, he had a hodgepodge. And he was still way up here with his numbers. Yeah, and so he's played with some bad quarterbacks and still produced.
100%. And I think, too, and I know you can attest to this, Greg, like to play receiver here in Chicago, you got to have the right makeup. You got to have the right DNA because as we know, you're going to play in elements. The field's not going to be great. The footy's not going to be there. And you've got to be tough. And, I think DJ Moore, the way he plays the game at receiver, he has the grit, the tenacity, the DNA that it takes to be successful, as a receiver here in Chicagoland. So that's why I was really excited about that because I said, you know what, that signing fits not only the culture in the locker room of the Bears, but it fits the type of environment that these receivers have to go out and excel in, on a week out basis.
Well, he's not a little guy. Exactly. I mean, he's not real tall. He's 6 feet tall.
Yeah.
But he's 210 pounds.
Yep.
He's put together, and he's a strong runner. You watch him when he's got the ball in his hands. He's like a running back, like a 210-pound running back. He's got some wiggle to him, and he's got some power. He's, you're not going to bring him down with an arm tackle. That's for damn sure.
If you had to compare DJ Moore to a guy that we've seen in the NFL before, who would you say he closest compares to from your time being a scout?
That's hard only because I don't like
doing the comparisons
comps that often. Yeah. In fact, it goes back another little story when
you don't want to Mel Kiper it, where it's like this guy is exactly.
Sometimes you do, but when I was working for the Giants and the GM was one of the great all-time GMs, George Young, and we start talking about comps, and George said, "Hey, the NFL doesn't practice Hinduism. There's no such thing as reincarnation. Each player is their own self."
That's a bar.
That makes a lot of sense. You can have traits, like a certain player. Like there's only one Jason McKie. You can't. Where are you going to go get the next one? Your makeup is your makeup.
Yeah. Somebody
can remind you of Jason, but that doesn't mean he's going to be the same player.
No, true, 100%.
That makes sense. Yeah, Greg, I want to ask you too, looking at what Ryan Poles had done this offseason, the free agents, the draft picks, how he's, designed his team compared to last year. What kind of grade would you give him this offseason so far?
Well, I don't think it's complete yet because they haven't gotten that edge player yet. And I think they probably wanted to draft one. And if you look at the way the draft fell, there's like 11 edge players off the board before they got to that first second round pick that they had. So it was like, hey, the guys we like are gone. But I think, and I know I'm getting away because I would give him a B+ to an A-, looking at the way that he doesn't spend money foolishly. He's not going to go out and just sign guys to sign guys. He's going to get guys that he knows are going to be good fit within the locker room. But he also, if you watch the way he's drafted, we've had 2 drafts now to watch him. He doubles up on important positions. And who's to say what an important position is? Well, you can go to free agency and look at the money some guys get, and that tells you what the important positions are. And, he's in 2 years, he's drafted 3 corners. Now, one, Terrell Smith, he got in the 5th round, but that's a steal.
Yeah.
That guy should have been a 3rd round pick. Why he lasted to the 5th, who knows? But as far as, watching how he's done things, he's got offensive linemen. He's got a couple corners and stuff. Now I said, he didn't get the edge position yet. And I can see 2 out of the 3 top picks next year being defensive ends. And when you think about it from a cap standpoint, you're loading up in important areas and spacing them out a little bit. So you're never going to get killed with the cap, having everybody get due for an extension at the same time.
Yeah. It's one of those things when I look at what Ryan Poles did this offseason. I even talked about over on the Breeze today, right? Like even the move to trade away Roquan Smith and what that brought, right? We end up being able to get 2 players and Tremaine Edmonds and TJ Edwards because of the flexibility. We end up getting a 2nd and a 5th, right? I look at how he set it up, and it feels like this Bears team is not only just set up for Justin Fields to have success if he should have success, but also that say it does go wrong, because that's a real option here. That's a real possibility here. You're not putting yourself in what I think Ryan Pace did, where it's swing for the fences, and if we miss, we're out of here.
No, really, when you look at it, he's only paid 1 guy.
Yeah.
Big money, and that's Edmonds.
Yeah.
And Edmonds, being that I'm from Buffalo, so I watch all their games, and you watch his career, is that he has really grown as a player from his rookie year. I didn't think he was that instinctive coming into the league. And he's just gotten better and better. And in fact, during this past season, I really noticed is that how much he has improved, anticipated so much more quickly, especially in the passing game, like last year. And he is, this might be sacrilegious saying this, but in coverage, he's like Brian. Mm-hmm. He takes away the center of the field. He's got the same height. He's got probably more length. He's got the same speed, maybe even faster, and he can get deep and take away those middle zones because of the way he can cover.
Yeah, 100%. And staying on the defensive side of things, and I know you touched on it when we opened this pod up. Some of the free agents out there, we talk about the Bears adding another edge rusher before training camp. Who are some of the names out there that you could see the Bears adding in terms of it making sense with the locker room, in terms of it making sense with the money in the cap? And who are some of the guys that you would like to see the Bears bring in?
Well, the guy I would have liked to see him bring in, signed with Buffalo, and that was Leonard Floyd. Because Leonard he's a linebacker. Well, no, not in this defense. In this defense, he's an edge.
Yeah.
And if you look at the way he played with the Rams, he was playing more like an edge, and he became a pass rusher.
Yeah.
He had the average 9.5 sacks the last 3 years playing for the Rams. And he's tough, and he's a pro. And, Teddy Monago, and Teddy was around him a lot. And Teddy said, know why we got to the Super Bowl? Leonard Floyd. He made the difference with that defense. He was that extra piece that we didn't have. And then his professionalism helped us got us over the hump and got us to the Super Bowl. Yeah. So I thought from that standpoint, he'll be 31, I think, this summer. He wasn't that old, that he might have been the right guy. And for all we know, he may have gone after it because supposedly he turned down offers to go to Buffalo because he wanted to chase a ring again. Yeah. So, but after that, we mentioned Ngakoue, Houston. After that, there's not much there, if anything. There's really only a few guys. And if you don't get anybody, then you got to hope Gibson reverts back to his form from year 2, and that Dominique Robinson really takes off in his second year. He's got the traits to do it, But, this guy's only played defensive line for 3 years in his life.
He was a quarterback 4 years ago.
A quarterback and then a wide receiver. So, he's still learning.
Let me ask you guys this. We actually do have some breaking news here on the podcast. I don't know if we've had this to this point. We got to get a breaking news sounder on here, Ring a bell. Chicago Bears owner Virginia Hallis McCaskey has been named a coach contributor semifinalist for the Pro Football Hall of Fame class 2024. When you hear that, what's the story? What's the moment that comes to your mind that really signifies what Virginia McCaskey means to NFL football, not just Bears football as a whole, but the NFL?
As Jason can tell you, she's not around a lot, at least, on a day-to-day basis. She comes to camp for a few days. She might come to practice during the season once a month. She's at all the games, and her kids run the show. But she's a very smart lady. She's very astute, and she commands respect. And but at the same time, she's pretty easy to talk to. You can go up and she's a nice lady. You can go up and strike a conversation with her and end up talking to her for 30 minutes, and it's a very enjoyable 30 minutes. So I've got nothing but good things to say about Mrs. McCaskey. I think, she's just a wonderful person.
Yeah, I agree with you too, Greg, 100%. Like every interaction I've had with Miss McCaskey, she's been genuine. She'll talk to you, and sometimes, a lot of players don't have an opportunity to meet the owners, and she was always around. You could walk up and talk to her. I know at alumni events, my wife always talked to her all the time. They sit there and they talk about, life for 30 minutes. And I tell my wife, like, who you're talking to? Like, that's Miss McCaskey. That's like, that's the owner. That's, what I'm saying? So it's just, with her being genuine, but also, like Greg said, knowing the game, understanding, what the Chicago Bears organization, means to the city of Chicago, and her, doing everything she can, her and her family, to bring home a winner, not just one season, but, consistency in terms of winning. She's deserving of that honor. And,
absolutely. I'll tell you a good story that really sticks out about her with me. And I was at the Bears convention one year. I had a talk for 15 minutes about something, and I had my daughter with me. So we're going around, and then we're in a room, and she's there, and she says, "Is this your daughter?" And I said, "Yes." So I introduced my daughter to her. She forgets about me. She talks to my daughter probably for the next 15 minutes, which I just thought was wonderful.
It's so cool when, like, even just starting this podcast to hear, right? Like Jason ended up going to mini camp, and he was like, "Flus coached my son for like 15 minutes." Yeah. Like how down to earth the Bears organization is and how real the people are. I feel like a lot of fans, you think of them as, superstars, athletes. Oh my God, they're above us. But it really is, you get to see the real people. And so I love that she gets this honor. I mean, she's the owner of the team that I have a 36-inch bear head of on my wall. So I can't, you'll never hear a bad word from her out of me. Let me ask you this, Greg, when it's all said and done, what's your expectation on this Chicago Bears team this season? Do you feel like they've done enough, maybe not to be a superstar team, but a definite contender for the playoffs?
I said it a few weeks ago. I think they're 9-17, and it's all going to depend on the first 4 games. And that, the way that first 4 games is set up, they can win 3 of them. Mm-hmm. And with the only L being Kansas City. So, that one, you got to be lucky to put that in the victory column. But the rest of those games are winnable games. And, Jason would know this, being an ex-player. Once you start winning games, then you build momentum and you build confidence. So if you come out of that first month 3-1, then it can be like, nobody thought the 2018 team would be worth a damn, and they ended up winning the division and getting to the playoffs. Yep. And they got off to a quick start. Well, this is the same thing. If they get off to a quick start and they stay injury-free, I think 9 wins is very easy. and maybe even more than that.
Yeah, I agree. I said 10 wins, and people were looking at me crazy. But, I evaluated the schedule just like you did, Greg, knowing that, it's with our division, and obviously it's up to grabs with a lot of question marks amongst all the teams in the NFC North. I think that, when I look at all the rosters, and I get your opinion on this too, Greg, when I look at the rosters, right, in NFC North, I don't see a roster that's any better than the Bears. I think the closest thing that I see is Detroit, but I still question the weapons they have at receivers. So in terms of a roster standpoint, where would you rank our roster in the NFC North amongst these other teams?
In all honesty, it might be, and I'm not being a homer, it might be near the top because I don't know what the hell Minnesota's doing.
Right.
It's like they're tearing everything down and going into tank mode. The way I look at it is they know they're at the end of the line with Cousins, and they want to be in position to get one of those quarterbacks next year. And there's some pretty good quarterbacks next year. But, they're giving away all their good players.
Yeah. And
if they end up trading away Hunter, who's their best pass rusher, then that's what they're doing. But it to me is they've gone downhill from last year. Green Bay is who the hell knows what they're going to be because you don't know what Love's going to do. And I've never been a fan of the Lions quarterback, even when he was coming
Jared
out
Goff.
of college.
Yeah.
He's played better in Detroit than he played in LA.
Yeah.
But he's okay. They got to coach him by their coach we drafted in New York. And it's funny because he was quiet as a mouse. He never talked. And now you see this real boisterous type guy. And, I think they really play hard for him. But, I don't, people want to give him the division. I don't think they're in that position where you can give them anything.
I'm just waiting for the Lions to lion. That's my thing. They always well, how many times have we seen this pop-up season? And then it's like, oh, now they're going to take that step. Listen, they don't have better weapons than Matt Stafford, Megatron, and Reggie Bush. So I'm not
Lions will be the Lions,
concerned about it at the end of the day. Before we let you go, Greg, last thing that I got to ask you, my co-host here did have a very nice NFL career. When he was coming in, did you evaluate any of his tape? And what were your thoughts if you did?
I do not. I was when he came into the league. What year did you come in?
I came in 2002.
Okay, so that was my first. So 2001 was your last year at Temple.
Yes, sir.
That was my first year here, and I don't remember evaluating Jason when he was at Temple. In fact, in my job, I evaluated need positions. The top 4 round need position type guys.
Yeah.
And, then we had the area scouts and Pat, at that time, Pat Roberts had the Northeast. So Pat would have done the evaluation. And all honesty, I don't even remember what the evaluation was. But I know when we got him, he was a pretty damn good player.
So now we got to find your college tape and get a modern day evaluation on it. That's the next check.
Well, I appreciate that, man. We Greg, we had some great guys. I mean, Greg, you had Chris Ballard, who the funny thing is, listening to your pod the other day, Greg, I didn't even know that you interviewed, Chris Ballard. Did you interview him when he was coming into Chicago?
He was my first hire.
Yeah, see, that's and you look at it.
We came. The story is we came here. It's like June 13th or something. It was really late, because the other front office, they left after the draft, and Ted went through the hiring process, and Jerry ends up getting the job. And I knew if Jerry got the job, I was getting the job. But it was still the middle of June. We were here for like maybe a couple days of OTAs because Dick used to. When you never played for Dick Duran here, right?
My first year, Dick.
Okay, well, you know how Dick handled OTAs. He had double sessions with OTAs because he wanted to get the hell out and get to the golf course and give everybody off. So your OTA sessions would be over like the first week in June. and you'd be done with it. So we only saw like a couple OTAs our first year here, if that. And then it was just us in the office trying to get ready, looking at who we want to keep and whatever. And it was just, a different type of situation of trying to, Jerry came from Tampa, I came from New York, Bobby came from Washington, and none of us had ever, I had worked with Jerry in New York, but as a group, we hadn't worked together, and I hadn't worked with Jerry since 1986 because he went to, in 87, he went to Tampa. So it was just trying to get everybody together.
Yeah, it's so funny, man. Like you've sparked so many careers of people that we wish we had here in Chicago.
Oh, but I'm sorry, I didn't answer the question. So anyway, when we come in, Jerry had let go 2 of the scouts and that were here. And actually before he did that, the very first day he was here, I was here like his 3rd day.
Yeah.
I flew in and he said, you got to hire 2 guys. So he gave me some names. He goes, I've met these guys on the road. They've been pro liaisons. I like what they have to offer, but it's your decision. You talk to them. So I said, okay. So, and 2 of the guys were Teddy Monago and Chris. So I called both, and I think I talked to each one. Now, I hired them both sight unseen. I talked to them both 4 times on the phone over the course of a week. And what I did when I interviewed people is I didn't try to talk them into the job. I tried to talk them out of the job because I knew how difficult it was. Teddy was single. That wasn't going to be a problem. But Chris was married, had kids. And it's like, hey, this is what's going to happen. And yet they still had that drive. And so it might have been foolish on my part, but it ended up not because I had 2 home run hires. But I without having personally met them, I hired both of them. Then we brought them in and they were here for a week, right up until the 4th of July. Yeah. And then they had off until we went to camp up in Platteville.
It's so interesting to hear that, man, that Chris Ballard is literally the other guy, right? The other person that when we were like, oh yeah, that seems like the perfect hire for the Bears. Wait, where's he going? We wanted him to do what?
But Pat, before we go, like even with the names that Greg mentioned, and we talk about Chris Ballard and Rex Hogan and all these guys. You talk about Teddy, like it goes back to being a family, right? Because most players, you don't get an opportunity to talk to the scouts or things of that nature, right? But there is such a family atmosphere with the Bears. It was such a family-oriented organization. Even to this day, like when I first got hired to be the head coach at Carmel, Chris Ballard, had texted me and he's like, "Hey, anything you need, let me know." We bounced text messages back and forth, and Chris is like, "Hey, reach out to me anytime that you need something." You know what I mean? And I've been down to the combine in Indy, in the Colts suite, watching the combine with Chris and Rex. I'm not sure if Rex is still there, but Rex.
No, Rex is the assistant GM with the Jets.
Okay, but Rex was in Indy at that time, with Ballard. Ballard brought him over there from Chicago with him. The same thing with Teddy. I still talk with him from time to time. So, and Greg as well. Greg's been to Carmel. He's been on the sideline. He's watched us, playing games. It's that type of family organization, but you have guys that genuinely care about their players. Yes, they were evaluators and they were, architects of an organization, of a team, but that just shows you their character. They really cared about the people they evaluated. They really cared about the people they brought in the organization. So for me, and Greg knows, I'm always appreciative of his time. I'm always appreciative of the support that he's given me. And that's why, that's why he's on the show. I reach out to Greg. He comes on the show. Greg reaches out to me. I'm on his show. So I genuinely appreciate your time, Greg. Always a great follow on Twitter. Make sure you guys are following him on Twitter as well. Always gives you great honest insight about the Bears. And Greg, always a pleasure, man. Love to have you back on sometime.
Well, thank you. But I got to tell you one other story about
Ballard. Let's do
it. Because Ballard, to me, is like a son.
Yeah.
And we knew 2 years in, So we hired him in June of 2001. By 2003, you knew that guy was going to be a GM. He just had that. His knack for evaluation was way up here, especially with defensive players. But not only did he know how to evaluate, he could sell a player. He did such a great job. Nate Vasher couldn't run worth a shit.
I ain't gonna tell him that,
but he couldn't sell. He kept selling this kid, and he kept going back in time, and he went back in time, Nate, like 4 times. And so the last time he comes back, and he goes,
"Oh man, no,
Greg, I got him in a 4.51." With that Texas accent. I said, "You're a lying SOB." I said, "That guy couldn't run 4.51 if you strap jet engines to his ankles." And he says, "That's what the clock said." So,
oh man,
but he's a hell of a player.
I'm not gonna tell Bash, man. I'm definitely
he knows the story.
Yeah, man. Bash, I'm gonna have to tell Bash. I'm like, hey man, Ballard, y'all Texas guys, y'all stick together, man. I like it.
Well, I tell you, I was at the pro day at Texas that year. He did not run good. He ran close to 4.6.
Yeah.
But when he did the 3-cone, it was like 6.7.
Yeah.
I mean, his feet, his quickness were rare, but just the flat out speed.
Yeah.
He just didn't have as compared to other corners, but that sucker could cover now.
He said he couldn't run with engines on his ankle. I'm keeping that. I don't know where I'm going to use that, but I will use that at another point in time. Greg, we appreciate you for coming on the podcast. We appreciate all the great stories. Let the people know kind of what you have coming up and where they can, of course, find your great podcast over on Barroom.
Well, we got the next one we're doing tomorrow, and we got a former coach, Bears coach. Pep Hamilton is going to be our guest.
Okay.
And Pep is a little breaking news here, which I didn't know until I talked to Pep the other day. He's going to be working for the NFL Network this year.
Ooh, that's awesome.
Sweet.
Because Pep is still under contract to Houston. I think he's got, I don't know how many years left, but I assume he's got 2 years. But he's got a son now who's a hell of a high school quarterback. He's already got 10 offers going into his junior year. And from some really good schools too, Texas A&M, Maryland, Vanderbilt. So that's what I want to talk to him about, is talk about, things that people don't know about. Talk about his son, Jackson, who can really wing it, and what he's going to be doing for the NFL Network this fall.
Absolutely great to hear. Make sure you guys tune in with Greg over at, it's always great. You're good when your podcast is just named after you. Greg Gabriel Talks Football Podcast. Well, it's just like, just search me. I got it. Don't worry about it. Make sure that you guys are tuned in 5 days a week over here on the Chicago Bears podcast as well. Hit that like button, sub, and leave a 5-star review. We appreciate you guys for showing so much love for Greg and J-Mac. I'm Pat the Designer. This is Chicago Bears podcast. Bear down, Chicago.
See you later, man.
Peace.
Bear down. Thanks, Greg.